Hello everyone, and welcome to another Cut Rate Commander Precon Upgrade Guide, the series where we take a look at Precon decks and bring them up to cut rate standards. My name is Grazzet, and today we'll be looking at the Veloci-Ramp-Tor Precon from Lost Caverns of Ixalan, and its face commander, Huatili's loyal companion, Pantlaza Sun-Favored, which we'll be bringing up from its roughly $40 price point to an increased budget of $75 after upgrades. But before we continue, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you like this content, and if you really like it, please consider supporting the channel directly, either through Buy Me a Coffee or through our Game Nerds affiliate link in the description. Also, if you haven't done so already, be sure to check out the ongoing 15K subscriber giveaway either on the card on this video or in the link in the description to enter for a chance to win a Bernard Ginger Sculptor Commander deck and to unlock sweet upgrades for it. So, with that out of the way, let's start by taking a look at the commander and playstyle. Pantlaza Sun-Favored is a 4/4 dinosaur that costs 2 and Naya that has the following ability. Whenever he or another dinosaur enters the battlefield under our control, we may discover X, where X is that creature's toughness, limited to once each turn. Breaking down his core stats, Pantlaza is sporting a decently hefty CMC, a slightly below average stat block for his cost, and an ability that aims to turn our dinosaurs into 2 spells for the price of 1 whenever they enter the battlefield. Now, before we dive deeper into Pantlaza's ability, let's first take a closer look at the new Discover mechanic, which, at first glance, immediately draws similarities to the existing Cascade mechanic, since they both let us dig through our deck for another spell that we may then cast from exile at no mana cost. The important distinction, however, is that, unlike Cascade, we don't lose that spell if we choose not to cast it, as it gives us the option to add it to our hand instead so we can hard cast it later, which gives us the flexibility to run cards we would be unwilling to run in Cascade builds since we wouldn't want to hit them off the top, either due to them needing a specific board state in order to be useful, or due to them being silver bullets that would only be useful under specific circumstances. This then brings us back to Pantlaza's ability, which tacks on Discover X to the first dinosaur that ETBs under our control each turn that scales off said dinosaur's toughness, including himself. Now, at surface level, that means we'll be getting a free CMC 4 or less spell when Pantlaza initially comes down, and then, ideally, 1 free spell per rotation as we naturally cast more dinosaurs on our turn. Which, to be fair, is an already superb effect, effectively turning the first dino we hardcast each turn into 2 spells for the price of 1, but, as we'll soon see, that's only the tip of the iceberg. You see, Pantlaza's ability is an enters the battlefield trigger, not a cast trigger, and is limited to once each turn, not just our turn, which not only allows us to take advantage of flicker and passive dinosaur token creation effects to discover on our turn at no mana cost, but also, more importantly, lets us discover on our opponent's turns if we can cast or cheat dinosaurs into play on their turns, taking us from 1 free spell from our deck per rotation to up to 4 for an absurd amount of value. So, as we've seen from our commander's ability, Pantlaza is clearly a dinosaur-themed commander that's all about value, aiming to have us play big statted dinosaurs in order to have them bring in a free spell with them as they come into play. And, as one might imagine, the core build is all in on this game plan, containing an absolutely absurd amount of new and old dinosaurs to trigger our commander and build up our board state with, plenty of dinosaur-centric payoffs to derive value from and empower them, an absolutely massive ramp package to allow us to get to said dinosaurs as quickly as possible, and even contains generic creature support that takes advantage of our dinos' huge stat blocks or helps make them even bigger. However, what this deck is critically lacking is enough ways for us to get our dinosaurs into play on our opponent's turns, of which it only contains 2 ways to do so out of the box. So, in this upgrade, we'll be focusing most of our efforts into doing just that, adding in more ways for us to cast our dinosaurs at flash speed, as well as ways for us to just cheat our dinosaurs into play on our opponent's turns, so we can cast as many spells for free off of Discover as possible. Then from there, we'll be making some quality of life changes to the build by slotting in more ways for us to take advantage of our gigantic creatures constantly entering the battlefield to help reload our hands with more dinosaurs to cast and cheat into play, and refining our dinosaur lineup with even more impressive specimens to run over our opponents with, until we're left with a menagerie of dinosaurs that even John Hammond would be impressed with. So let's delve deep into the underground of Ixalan, into the hollow earth of the long-forgotten Oltec Empire, where we'll find Huatili and her raptor companion Pantlaza locked in fierce combat against the demonically transformed Vito and his Dusk Legionnaires. And while Vito and his followers' already formidable vampiric bodies had been further augmented by Aklazot's foul magic, they had failed to realize one simple truth. Pantlaza was a dinosaur, the peak of evolution that existed before any other race on the plane. He did not need the blessing of a god nor the curse of undeath to make him a dangerous predator. He was the result of millions of years of survival of the fittest, weeding out the weak until only the strongest survived. And soon these vampires would learn there was a reason why dinosaurs were the top of the food chain, if only for a few moments before they became part of it. So, now that we know a bit more about the commander and playstyle, let's jump straight into the upgrades. So, as I briefly explained earlier, if we want to get the maximum value possible out of Pantlaza, we're going to need to orchestrate ways for us to have dinosaurs enter the battlefield outside of our turns. So we'll then be adding those means to our build in either the form of A, using our gigantic ramp package to hardcast our dinos at flash speed, or B, cheating our dinosaurs into play on our opponent's turns through other means. Starting with option A first, we'll be supplementing the core build's only other source of flash speed casting by removing Dinosaur Egg, which fits the Dinosaur and Discover theme on paper, but is a bit too slow and too hard to proc due to our build's lack of sack outlets, in favor of the Planeswalker Vivian Champion of the Wilds, who passively allows us to cast any of our creatures at flash speed, while also providing additional upside via turning one of our big statted dinosaurs into a defensive juggernaut for a full rotation via granting it vigilance and reach, or by letting us dig for more dinosaurs to cast and trigger Pantlaza later, and replacing Weta Trainer Prodigy, who's an okay source of repeatable removal here, but really deserves to headline an Enrage themed build of her own to get the maximum value out of her on-damage trigger doubling, with another Planeswalker, Arlinn the Pack's Hope, whose front face not only enables us to cast our creatures at flash speed for an entire rotation, but also has them come in with an additional +1/+1 counter to bump their stats and make their Discover 1 higher as they come down, while her back face provides some solid ramp to help us hardcast our higher CMC spells on our turn, while freeing up our lands and other sources of mana to get our dinosaurs into play on other turns. Then taking a look at option B, building on the core build's only other way to cheat creatures into play on our opponent's turns, we'll start off on the creature side of things by cutting Savage Stomp, which is serviceable on theme removal but is edged out by better options already in the build, rendering it unnecessary, to add in Elvish Piper, which for the cost of only a single mana can cheat even our biggest dinosaurs into play on anyone's turn, making it a fantastic way to drop surprise blockers or to grant our dinosaur pseudo-haste as they come down before the turn gets back to us, all while Pantlaza tacks on a free spell to them on top of that. And then on the non-creature side of things, we'll be swapping out both Fiery Confluence and Rishkar's Expertise, which are a fine removal / board wipe and draw spell respectively, but again, we have plenty of better options in the build already, so we'll be swapping in Monster Manual and Quicksilver Amulet in their place, which, like the previous entry, allow us to cheat our dinosaurs into play on our opponent's turns, usually at a considerable discount, this time from the relative safety of our back row, and, unlike our flash-granting sources, we're generally perfectly content in drawing multiples of these to let us cheat more creatures into play per rotation for even more value. And lastly, we'll be sidelining from the rubble, which is a fantastic source of continual reanimation that our deck has sadly no way to enable on its own, to slot in lurking predators, which is absolutely fantastic in this build since it, at best, lets us cheat a dinosaur from our deck into play at no mana cost whenever an opponent casts a spell, or, at worst, nets us a free scry as they cast their spells instead. The former of course being backbreaking, as it can potentially occur multiple times per rotation to load up our board with free big dinosaurs while triggering Pantlaza for even more value, and even the latter still being good as a way for us to send unwanted land drops and ramp pieces to the bottom of our deck in the late game, so we can dig for more dinosaurs and payoffs for them instead. But wait, it looks like we have a sneaky option C to trigger Pantlaza's Discover more often, that being by simply doubling down on its effect by removing one of our excess lands, in this case the slow-fetch Terramorphic Expanse, to put in Curator of Sun's Creation in its place, which allows us to discover twice every single time we trigger Pantlaza to generate an absurd amount of free spells for us per rotation, especially now considering we'll be able to do so on our opponent's turns as well. So, now that we've covered the new ways we'll be getting our dinos into play, let's move on to augmenting the deck's already built-in means to generate card advantage as we cast and/or cheat those dinosaurs into play, since we'll certainly be needing it in order to keep drawing into more dinosaurs to keep triggering Pantlaza. As such, we'll be removing Descendant's Path, whose ability to potentially cast a dinosaur for free on our turn seems good, but I personally find it being way too unreliable and even detrimental for a once per rotation effect, since 2 out of 3 times it will do nothing but send the top card of our deck to the bottom, including all our ways to cheat or cast our dinosaurs on our opponent's turns since the effect is mandatory, as well as raising the terrible land Temple of the False God so we can open space for Elemental Bond and Garruk's Uprising, each of which draws cards as our Power 3 and 4 dinosaurs ETB, which is a good chunk of them, thereby providing us with a steady stream of card advantage to dig for more dinosaurs to cast and cheat into play while we cast and cheat our dinosaurs into play, with the latter also providing AoE trample as a bonus to ensure all our big statted and non-trampling dinosaurs can still pile on the damage. And now, having covered all the new ways we'll be getting our dinosaurs into play and generating value from them, we've at last reached our new dinosaur additions, which we'll be using to supplement the core build's admittedly already impressive selection of dinosaurs with new, even more impressive specimens. Specimens that can take advantage of the build's gigantic ramp package to help us hardcast them reliably, or that we can simply cheat into play with our previously covered additions. Starting off with the smallest of our new dinosaur additions, we'll be axing Deathgorge Scavenger, whose on-attack single-target graveyard hate is serviceable but a bit slow, in favor of Tranquil Frillback, who, for the same price, gets us more toughness to discover bigger spells with, provides much better graveyard hate via blowing out an opponent's entire graveyard for only a single mana more, and, on top of that, lets us pump even more mana into it to blow up more graveyards, destroy back row, or gain life in any combination. Then moving on to a larger specimen, we'll be removing Raging Regisaur, whose on-attack ping doesn't provide enough removal or burn to warrant its inclusion, to make room for Kogla and Yadaro, whose ETB fight effect is much better removal, and, on top of that, can alternatively make itself into a hasty trampler when it comes down instead to crash in with, or can instead be used as a cantripping piece of back row removal if drawn early that spins itself back into the deck to be drawn or discovered later. And then reaching some of the apex predators we'll be adding to our Jurassic menagerie, we'll be sidelining Shifting Ceratops, whose keyword granting and protection against blue are okay, but not particularly impressive, to swap in Tyrannix Rex, who possesses a much bigger stat block, has various keywords naturally to make itself more dangerous and resilient, and even has Toxic 4 on top of that to slowly poison our opponents even if they don't succumb to its damage output, putting in Squith, Firstborn of Gashath, back into the hatchery, its ETB fight effect that we still have to pay for not being good enough to warrant its inclusion, so we can add in Silver-clad Ferocidons, whose AoE edict removal upon taking damage is much more the speed of removal we're looking for to disrupt our opponents with while it cracks in, and Majestic Heliopterus being sent back to the Aviary, as its single target evasion granting is decent but unnecessary here due to our high volume of trampling threats, to make room for Goring Ceratops, whose AoE double strike granting when it swings in is significantly more impressive, synergizing nicely with our aforementioned tramplers to enable devastating alpha strikes, especially if we're able to drop it on our opponent's turn so we can catch them off guard. And finally, reaching the most impressive of our new specimens, we'll be cutting Thundering Spineback, who's a passable tribal lord, but its low stats and high cost token creation make it not worth running here, and Rampaging Brontodon, which is admittedly a gigantic beatstick that only gets better as we make our land drops, but loses out here since this deck has no shortage of beaters that are either cheaper or bring more to the table, to bring in the legends Galta and Mavrin, and Galta Primal Hunger, both of which are 12/12 trampling beatsticks to run over our opponent's blockers and life totals with the former being able to create upwards of 5/5 plus dinosaur tokens as it swings in to build up our board state with and to trigger Pantlaza at no mana cost, while the latter will generally only cost us 2 mana to cast thanks to our other high-statted dinosaurs helping reduce her cost, allowing us to trigger our commander on the cheap, and leaving the rest of our mana open to cast and cheat more dinos into play on our opponent's turns. And with the last of our new dinos covered, we'll be adding in one final piece of dino support to the build by cutting another one of our excess lands, this time our other slow fetch Evolving Wilds, to slot in Forerunner of the Empire, a simple tribal tutor for us to use to bring any of our dinos right to the top of our deck so we can draw into them or discover them, while also serving as a repeatable way for us to clear the board of smaller creatures and tokens as we bring our dinos into play as a bonus. And then to wrap up the changes we'll be making to this build, we'll be making some quality of life changes to our ramp package by swapping out Migration Path for the cheaper Kodama's Reach to ensure we can hit all our land drops in the early game more reliably, and refining our land base by terraforming the 3 thriving lands included in the base build into Rootbound Crag, Rockfall Vale, and Croson Verge, the first 2 giving us access to our 2 most common colors while generally coming into play untapped to help us improve our mana base's consistency without having to sacrifice speed to do so, and the third providing us with one last source of non-basic land ramp, helping us speed up and fix our mana curve from the relative safety of our land slot. So, now that we've covered all 21 cards that we've upgraded from the core build, let's take a look at the breakdown for this Precon upgrade. This deck currently has 42 creatures including our commander, 4 instants, 6 sorceries, 4 enchantments, 6 artifacts, 2 planeswalkers, and 36 lands. Looking at the stats that matter to our game plan, we have 34 dinosaurs, 19 cards that care about dinosaurs, 17 cards that care about any creatures, 5 cards that let us cheat our creatures into play, and 3 cards that let us cast our creatures at flash speed, leaving us with a very simple but devastatingly effective dinosaur build with a huge number of powerful dinosaurs, plenty of ways for us to generate value from them and empower them, and a handful of ways for us to bring them into play outside of our turns to get the maximum value out of our commander. Then for general deck stats, we have 20 ramp sources, 13 card draw sources, 11 targeted removal sources, and 4 board wipes. Our ramp package being off the charts in this build due to our mana curve being high as well, on top of us also needing that mana to flash speed cast or cheat our dinos into play multiple times per rotation, while our other stats fall within more typical ratios. Looking at our mana curve, we have 3 1-drops, 7 2-drops, 19 3-drops, 9 4-drops, 10 5-drops, 6 6-drops, 5 7-drops, 2 8-drops, 2 9-drops, and 1 12-drop, leaving us with a heavyweight mana curve that aims to use our massive ramp package to build up our mana base in the early game, and making a beeline for Pantlaza as quickly as we can. Then, once he hits the board, it's just a matter of us continually casting and or cheating out bigger and bigger dinosaurs on both our and our opponent's turns, flooding the board with their massive stat blocks while they cast us more and more free spells from our deck as they come down, until our opponents are torn apart by the absolutely gigantic horde of enormous dinosaurs we're able to assemble. The final price of this build then comes out to be $75.06 after upgrades. This price does not include tax or shipping and assumes that the price that you paid for the Precon was $40. The price of most of the cards was calculated by using the cheapest listed marketplace price on TCG Player at the time of this recording, though for a few of the newer cards still on presale, pricing on Cool Stuff Inc. was used instead. Now, for side grades, if we're finding that our opponents are constantly targeting Pantlaza to try to deny us value, we can consider slotting in ways to protect him by cutting Monster Manual and or Arlen the Pack's Hope for Lightning Greaves and or Swiftfoot Boots for individual targeting protection, or, if we'd rather protect our entire board, we can consider swapping out Lurking Predators for Asceticism in order to protect all our dinosaurs from targeting and destruction, though keep in mind that these changes will slow down the rate at which Pantlaza can discover for us, though keeping him alive for longer may be worth the trade-off. And as a side note, depending on how the price of these settle, most of the Jurassic World cards in our colors should also warrant consideration, as they undeniably contain very powerful tribe members and tribal support tools for dinosaurs that will increase the power of any dino build they are a part of. Then for additional upgrades, though as a disclaimer I would recommend waiting for these prices to drop in the next few weeks since they're all in the main set, we can replace Bellowing Agisaur with Gishath Sun's Avatar, who serves as a repeatable way for us to cheat huge swaths of dinosaurs from our deck into play every time he cracks in. Raging Swordtooth can be axed for Bone Horde Dracosaur, whose combination of solid stats, keywords, and repeatable impulse draw with treasure and dino token creation attached make it both a solid beatstick and source of value. And Tyrannix Rex can be traded out for Galta Stampede Tyrant, who gives us access to another base 12/12 Trampler that this time lets us dump all our dinosaurs from our hand into play as she ETBs, which can easily end games out of nowhere if we're able to bring her down on our opponent's turns before they can mount a proper defense. And lastly, if we want to get even more mileage out of our dinosaurs entering the battlefield because we are in green after all, we can replace Lifecrafter's Bestiary with the Great Henge, because of course it does all the things. Ramps us to help us cast and cheat dinosaurs into play, draws us cards and makes our dinosaurs bigger as they come down, and typically only costs us 2 to cast thanks to our dinosaurs' big stat blocks. Oh yeah, and it gains us life, because of course it does. But hey, at least it's down to $40 now after the reprint. Just move on to the outro. I need a moment. Thanks everyone for sticking around until the end of the video. So, now that we've covered the Veloci-Ramp-Tor Precon, it's time to put fish back on the menu as we tackle the Explorers of the Deep Precon, along with its face commander, Hawkball of the Surging Soul. So look forward to a Merfolk +1/+1 counter themed build featuring him coming soon. In the meantime though, be sure to check out our currently ongoing, at the time of posting this, 15K subscriber giveaway, where we'll be raffling off a full commander deck being helmed by Bernard Ginger Sculptor, built by yours truly, and, as is tradition, giving you the opportunity to unlock some sweet upgrades for it depending on how many new subscribers the channel gets and how many likes the video gets before the drawing on November 15th. So either click on the card in this video or on the link in the description to go to the video where you can sign up for your chance to win. And, again, thank you all for your support for having helped the channel reach this milestone, as we wouldn't have gotten here without all of your support. And lastly, before we close out, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't done so already, as this channel can't continue to grow without your support. And if you're feeling particularly generous, feel free to keep me caffeinated via buying me a coffee at the link in the description, or alternatively, use our Game Nerds affiliate link in the description if you're looking to purchase sealed MTG product, accessories, board games, or any of their other wide selection of products at low prices that include free shipping for orders over $75, and a rewards program that builds up store credit over time as you make your purchases. And if any of you would like to support the channel in a different way, feel free to check out the other deck techs floating around my head if you'd like to see the latest builds, or click on the link above for a playlist of all the Cut Rate Commander episodes I've made so far. And with that, have a good one folks, and stay safe.